So, have you ever wondered how a faith that was founded over 1400 years ago manages to navigate the sheer complexity of our modern world? I mean, really think about it. How on earth does a 7th century legal framework give us clear guidance on completely unprecedented stuff, like using an ATM, the permissibility of vaping, or even how a Muslim might pray if they were in orbit up in space? It's a genuinely fascinating question, and today we're going to unpack exactly how all of that works in this explainer.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into Islamic jurisprudence, specifically zeroing in on two incredibly vital tools that scholars use to bridge the ancient past with our rapidly changing present. We like to call this the Anchor and Apply framework, and it centers on two core concepts: Ijma, which means consensus, and Qiyas, which is analogical reasoning.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our structural roadmap for today. We'll start with why we even need new laws in the first place. Then we'll break down a definition and the modern use of ijma. After that, we'll do the exact same thing for our second tool, qiyas. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at how both of these guarantee stability in Islamic law. Section 1. The need for new laws. When the Quran and Sunnah don't explicitly say.
Now, the absolute foundation of Islamic law always begins with the Quran and the Sunnah, which are the practices of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But, as we all know, society evolves. New technologies pop up, new situations emerge. So what happens when a brand new issue arises that just isn't directly mentioned in those foundational texts? Well, Islamic law requires a highly systematic way to resolve these legal disputes and guide the community. You see, it can't just be guesswork. It has to be firmly rooted in authoritative tradition. And that is exactly where our two tools come into play.
Section 2. Understanding Ijma, the power of community agreement.
Let's lock in the precise definition here, which is super important if you're studying the mechanics of these laws. Ijma is the consensus of the Muslim community, primarily the highly trained Islamic scholars, on a legal issue that is not explicitly addressed in the Quran or Sunnah. Just imagine 100 experts needing to make a critical decision, and they all mutually agree on the exact same outcome. When it comes to Islamic law, if scholars run into a modern legal problem with no prior direct ruling, they debate it, study it, and come to a unified agreement. That collective agreement, that is ijma.
But you might be sitting there asking, well, what gives scholars the authority to just do this? In Islam, every single practice has to be backed by divine authority. And the authority for ijma comes directly from the hadith. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave his followers a really powerful assurance. He stated, "My community will never agree upon an error." This guarantees that when the scholarly community comes together in a true, unified consensus, their collective decision is protected from falsehood. Plus, there's another hadith that explicitly instructs believers to stick with the community and avoid splintering off into different paths.
So the crucial point here is that this isn't just some cultural tradition, it's a divine directive. The authority for ijma is also deeply rooted in the Quran itself, which commands believers to conduct their affairs by mutual consultation. The Quran also instructs believers to obey those in authority, which scholars have long interpreted as including the Islamic scholars and leaders who guide these exact kinds of legal consultations.
And this practice of mutual consultation, it definitely isn't new. It has a rich, established history, which is a key foundational element to remember. Even during the era of the Prophet, peace be upon him, consultation was used actively, like when the community agreed to Salman Farsi's strategic idea to dig a trench for defense. Later on, during the era of the companions, specifically Abu Bakr and Uthman, a shura council sat down and reached a consensus to compile the Quran into a standard single form using the Qurayshi dialect. Moving forward into the Caliphate, as communities grew massively, people who were traveling from distant places kept missing the start of Friday prayers. So, a consensus was reached to add a second azan for Jummah prayers, giving those travelers enough time to arrive. Similarly, it was through consensus during Omar's time that the 20 rakat tarawih was decided upon, to really encourage community worship and complete the Quran recitation.
Section 3. Ijma in modern times, adapting to the present day.
And ijma is incredibly active today. It's how the law stays relevant. When new, modern dangers emerge, scholars use ijma to protect the community. For instance, modern scholars have reached a firm consensus declaring terrorism and suicide bombings as haram, completely forbidden. The same goes for modern health hazards like cigarettes. Through consensus, because of their undeniable harm, they've been ruled haram. Even on a superlocal level, ijma is used to determine community-specific logistics, like agreeing on exactly what time Tarawih or Eid prayers will be held at your local masjid. It's an amazing tool that perfectly adapts the law to modern societal contexts.
Section 4. Understanding Qiyas, the logic of deduction.
Now, if ijma is all about consensus, qiyas is all about logic. Qiyas is analogical reasoning. It's basically the process where a brand new legal issue is compared to a similar older issue that has already been addressed in the Quran or Sunnah. If you can find a common material similarity between the old case and the new case, you can deductively apply the ruling of the old text to the new problem.
And just like we saw with ijma, qiyas requires strict authority to be valid. The Quran actually actively encourages believers to use their intellect. It clearly says, "Take admonishment, O people of insight," meaning we are commanded to learn, contemplate, and think deeply about the signs and situations in the world around us.
But the definitive authority for qiyas from the Hadith comes from a really famous historical event. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sent Mu'adh bin Jabal to Yemen to be a governor, he asked him a simple question: how would he judge matters? Mu'adh replied he would judge first by the Book of Allah. If the answer wasn't there, he would judge by the tradition, the Sunnah, and if it wasn't there, Mu'adh said he would strive to form his own opinion using his intellect. The Prophet, peace be upon him, highly praised this answer. This brilliantly validates the use of logical text-based deduction when the original sources don't provide an explicit, direct answer.
So how exactly does this logical deduction work in practice? It's basically a four-step formula. And for those of you studying the mechanics of this, you will definitely want to lock this structure in. Step 1 is identifying the original text or the original case, which is known as the asal. Step 2 is identifying the new problem, known as the far. Step 3 is finding the common cause or the material similarity linking the two, which is called the ila. And finally, step 4 is determining the new ruling, the hukum, based entirely on that shared similarity.
Section 5. Applying qiyas today. The formula in action. Let's see how this builds out in the real world. Let's run a highly relevant modern issue right through our qiyas formula. The original text, the asal, from the Quran and Hadith states that wine and every intoxicant is haram. Now we have a new problem, the far, modern narcotics like ice, meth, or heroin. Obviously, these aren't explicitly named in a 7th century text, but we find the common cause, the illa, which is intoxication. Because wine intoxicates and is haram, and modern drugs intoxicate, the new ruling, the hukum, is logically deduced. Modern drugs are also haram. It's a completely airtight logical framework.
Here's another fascinating example that compares a historical event to a modern cosmetic. In the Hadith, Hazrat Aisha had some dried flour dough on her nail after baking, which blocked water from reaching her skin during wudu, the ritual washing. The Prophet, peace be upon him, instructed her to remove it and redo the wudu because the water absolutely must reach the nail. Using qiyas, scholars look at modern nail polish today. Because it creates a physical barrier that blocks water from reaching the nail, which is the exact same common cause as the dried flour dough, the new ruling is that nail polish must also be removed for wudu to be valid.
And this brilliantly illustrates how economic rules adapt to the present too. The Quran contains a strict command to leave all trade and worldly activities once the call for Jummah or Friday prayers is made. In the past, this meant physically stepping away from your stall in the marketplace. Today, using qiyas, scholars apply this exact same ruling to modern finance. Taking money out of an ATM or executing an online trade on your smartphone during the Jummah sermon and prayer is declared haram. The medium has completely changed from a bustling marketplace to a glowing smartphone screen, but the underlying principle remains perfectly intact.
Section 6. Stability in Islamic law, continuity and development. Ultimately, the primary role of Islamic jurisprudence is to prevent chaos. Without a system to resolve new issues, society would just fracture into endless, messy debate. Ijma and Qiyas provide a magnificent balance here. On one hand, they provide perfect stability by anchoring every single new law firmly to the original texts of the Quran and Sunnah. This ensures that a Muslim in modern America or Africa is following the exact same foundational principles as a Muslim in 7th century Arabia. But at the exact same time, they allow for continuous development. The law isn't just frozen in time. It actively adapts and breathes to address emerging, unprecedented issues.
Which leads us right back to where we started. Without the consensus of ijma and the analogical reasoning of qiyas, how could a timeless faith continuously guide its followers through an ever-changing world? If a Muslim travels into space tomorrow and needs to know the direction of prayer or the specific timings for fasting, it is exactly these tools, drawing on mutual consultation and profound logical deduction, that will provide the answer. It's an incredibly dynamic system that keeps ancient wisdom perfectly relevant, no matter how far into the future we go. So what new frontiers do you think Islamic jurisprudence will have to tackle next?